So runway shows, I'm trying to think of how the best way to, again, you get recommended for runway shows based on relationships. I worked with Castello Tagliapietra, and I love them. They're these two bear daddies in Brooklyn who do beautiful dresses. And I just really love their collection. And I wanted a show in New York, and I didn't have one. And I just moved back here. And so I just cold called them. Or I didn't do it. I had my agent call their publicist and say, Sally loves the collection. You know, she'd love to style for you guys. And that's the only time I've cold called someone, and they were like, oh, we love her work too, like, let's have lunch. And we had lunch, and then we ended up working together for like 3 or 4 seasons. But usually it comes from a recommendation. Sometimes it comes from the PR team. Like the PR director or marketing director of the company works with us works with a stylist on an advertising job, or works with us when we're doing samples, or meets us out at an event, or whatever, and something resonates for them, and they think of us for the collection. And that's, then they bring us in a recommendation that way. Sometimes I guess sometimes, I don't know, I'm trying to think of, the designers will also see our work in magazines. That's where the editorial is also highly, highly important, because the editorial will bring you your shows. And if you do editorial and work for magazines that a designer respects, then they'll be far more likely to meeting with you or approaching you for the show. Like, I just got approached for a show during Fashion Week, and it's one of the new CFDA Fun Fashion, whatever, the CFDA Fashion Fun people. And they just like my work, and so they called. So then that was based on my editorial. So, that's another reason why editorial is so important, because it gives you the gateway to work with the runway shows you want to work with. The runway shows, like what we do, like we started talking about, what we bring to the runway shows for a designer is we bring the outside perspective, and then we bring an interpretation of what's happening in fashion. And when I'm working with a high fashion person, someone who's competing in the high-end market, I hate saying high-end because it automatically sounds cheap. Like the luxury market. When you're dealing with the Castello Tagliapietras, and like when I work with Victoria Beckham and people like that, I like to really clearly say what happened last season so we can make sure to avoid it. Because it's really important, like if everyone did 70s last season, it's not really so smart to do 70s the next season. Because you look a season behind, and it just doesn't work. Like the reviews end up being bad, and the sales end up being bad because you're like a season late. And so the fashion interpretation of being able to look at what's happening with the shows and all that stuff, and the shows and the editorials, and kind of say, okay, like this is what happened. Let's try to steer clear of those things. It's the same as being able to say, that's Prada Spring 2008. We don't want to do that. Or we do want to do that. It's great. I try to go 10 years older or more, but it's just important to already have that knowledge. That's one of the big reasons they're bringing us in. And then for our inspiration, we've talked about inspiration over and over and over again today. That's another big reason, is because we have bringing in our different perspective on cultural references. Like once when I was working with Castello, we did a fairy tale collection. And you couldn't tell really from looking at the clothes, but that was our background for it. Like our inspiration, like I went and looked at all the beautiful old fairy tale inspirations. And I bought all the old Hans, what was his name? Hans Christensen. Yeah, Christian Andersen. And then the Lewis Carroll, like all those old illustrations. And we went and looked at them, and we were like looking at the amazing little animals, and the guy who did the original Wizard of Oz books. All those illustrations, and it ended up translating into like little hats that looked like 1940s hats, but they were like raccoon print, and they kind of looked like little bunny ears, but you kind of couldn't tell. Like it translated into all these really subtle things, but the research I had done gave us such a background to be really creative inside of this like format that they already had of these beautiful dresses, And then we kind of started doing monotone, like it was animal fur and things like that. And like monotone in the sense we did these, matching gloves on both sides. So it was very little skin showing almost. So they were like animals with their fur and like their tights and their shoes, like the whole thing. So the inspiration, what I brought to the table was so different from what they brought to the table that the two of them combined, it was just a really, really cool voice and a cool story. And it's kind of like we were talking about earlier today about Marie Amélie mixing with Gucci. It's kind of two opposite things coming together, and it just ends up working. sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't work. But when you get a really good connection going with designer, you can really make it work.